You can also get it from Amazon and Barnes & Noble, of course. Order through your local bookstore as well. There's both a print version and Kindle version available, too. And for Mysterious World, you can go to mysteriousworld.com. And if you wish to send me an email, you can send an email to publisher@mysteriousworld.com. Or you can look up Mysterious World on Facebook. And we have a Facebook page as well. Also a Planet X page.
Excellent. Well, speaking of Planet X, what is Planet X? How would you define Planet X? What is it?
Planet X is a mainstream astronomical concept derived in order to try to figure out some of the anomalies in our solar system. The original Planet X theory was derived by Percival Lowell in the late 1900s as the name of an unknown planet which they believed orbited beyond Neptune. Now, when they searched for Planet X, they used the conventional methods of blink comparison to see the difference between two different plates, two different images taken of photographs of the night sky. And they had a man named Clyde Tombaugh come in, a young astronomer, come in and go through tens of thousands of plates using what is called a blink comparator to see if he could find Planet X beyond the planet Neptune. Using this technique, which is basically showing two different images of the same piece of sky a few seconds apart, or possibly a few minutes apart, to see if there's any differences between the two. And if you see a difference, that image will contain the image of a planet because of that distance, because of parallax. Only a distant object, or only a planet in our solar system, or an object in our solar system would move because the background stars are, for all practical purposes, fixed because they're so far away. So using that technique, Clyde Tombaugh found the planet, what turned out to be planet Pluto, I think around 1930, something like that. But it wasn't the Planet X they were looking for. So the Planet X theory kind of lingered for a while because they weren't able to find it using that technique. But when the Voyager spacecraft, the Voyager probes, passed Uranus and Neptune in the 1970s, they found both of these planets had been radically transformed by some sort of external force. The planet Uranus was actually spinning on its side, and it had formed a ring system after it had been turned on its side, which was kind of unusual, indicating that it had been disrupted by a very large object, a massive planet-sized object that had intruded into our solar system sometime in the solar system's past. Neptune was similarly messed up. Its rotation and magnetic axes were about 80 degrees off kilter. It was very strange. It had a moon, Neptune, which had a normal orbit, but also a moon called Nereid, which had an elliptical orbit, which was like a 9-to-1 ratio, which was really weird, which should not have happened, and another moon which orbited backwards. So, contrary to the other moons. So, when they did the mathematics, they determined the anomalies with Uranus and Neptune could only have occurred if there was an interaction with a planet-sized object, a planet, intruding into our solar system. This planet is about 5 times the mass of Earth, and entering our solar system from the outside. And so that's what revived the Planet X theory, and there was a craze about searching for Planet X for the next couple of decades. It's died down from there, but well into the 1980s and the early 1990s, there are all kinds of articles and research done on the search for Planet X. And in my book, Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age, chronicles the major research done on Planet X during that period. And they're still looking for it. They believe that it is possibly in the southern hemisphere, having an elliptical orbit, because, in order to have interacted with the solar system and yet be invisible, it would have to be have an orbit that precesses over time, and it actually shifts in its angle to the solar system. This explains why the comets orbit at an angle to the solar system. Comets, many people don't know, they have not only do they have orbits that take them out of the solar system for very elliptical orbits, but they also have orbits, many of them, that are at an angle to the ecliptic. So they not only exit the solar system on the x-axis, but also on the y-axis. And the only way this could have happened is if an intruding object came in and brought them in. And this is where another reason for the Planet X theory is. Astronomers believe Planet X, or an object like Planet X, when it comes into our solar system, brings the comets in with it. And this is why we have comets that come in and out of our solar system, because there's no other way to describe, no other mechanism to describe how this could happen. There has to be an intrusive object coming in and out of our solar system. So the evidence for Planet X is, at this point, primarily the great eccentricities in the outer solar system, and also the existence of the comets. So the Planet X theory is actually a mainstream astronomical theory, which has been, widely held by a number of astronomers for over 100 years now. Now, when you talk about the Sitchin-esque approach, where you have Planet X as the featured character in the Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian creation epic. You have to take the idea that the ancient Babylonians were actually aware of how the earth was created, and this is a bit of a stretch for some people, even people who believe in God, because it's a bit of a stretch. But if we were to take, well, when you have biblical passages which describe God's conflict with the dragon and the sea, in the context of the creation, Psalm 74, and several times in Job, and also in some of the Psalms, you have Psalm 74 and also Job and Isaiah. You have a clear distinction, a clear description in the scriptures also of the earth being created as a result of a conflict between God and some sort of a dragon. And now in Enuma Elish, the dragon actually symbolized the earth. And it does also in the Bible because, though it's not specifically stated, it's clearly implied that as a result of this conflict, earth was created. Psalm 74, for example, says, "You defeated the dragon, you created the seasons and the times." As a result of the conflict, the earth's orbital period and axial tilt was somehow created as a result of this conflict. And I get into this in depth into my book, how Enuma Elish actually probably is a very detailed description of a conflict between planet X and the Earth in ancient times, forming the Earth as we know it now. The Earth having originally formed in the fourth position from the Sun, not the third, explaining why there is a huge amount of rocky material out there in the form of the asteroid belt, which, if you put it all together, would form a very small body, maybe 1/10 the size of our moon. It's not nearly enough to form a planet. So scientists believe, astronomers believe that, not astronomers, but some of these fringe scientists and people like me who believe in the possibility of alternative theories like this, believe that the Earth was created as a result of, in its present form, was created as a result of the giant impact between a satellite of planet X, an intrusive body into our solar system, and Earth. And this explains why you have in Genesis 1:1 not the word create, but the word cut, because the word for created in Genesis 1:1 is not the word for created, it's the word bara, which means to cut, literally to cut something into two pieces, to split it. And so when you have this description of the earth being split into two pieces into heaven and earth, this matches perfectly with the description in Enuma Elish of how the Babylonian deity Marduk, whom I believe replaced God in the mythology of the Babylonians as the creator of heaven and earth. But the mythology of the Babylonians still retains the basic understanding. They believe that Marduk, or Planet X, took one of its satellites and used it to split Earth into two pieces. This is the description of the splitting off the asteroid belt from the Earth. And it also describes in Enuma Elish how Marduk took another one of these winds or satellites and moved the Earth into a new position. It literally says that the head of Tiamat was used to form the Earth, and it was moved from its original position. I believe that the book of Genesis, chapter 1, describes this also when it says, the Spirit or wind of God hovered over the waters. Literally means that that passage literally says that the wind of God hovered over the waters in order to warm them. And the process of warming, the term is described of a hen or a female bird warming the eggs. And the earth is kind of thought of as an egg being warmed by a hen or a female bird. And what a female bird does to warm the eggs, well, not only does she sit on them, she rolls them. So the idea, I think, that Genesis was, in parallel to Enuma Elish, was that the earth was rolled into a new position closer to the sun where it would be warmer. That's the concept. The Holy Spirit acted like a mother hen, this divine wind, rolling the earth into a position where it would be warmer. That's why Moses used the metaphor of a mother hen warming the eggs, of rolling the earth to a new place closer to the sun where it would be warm enough to sustain life. And that's just one of many parallels I found in Genesis and in the Psalms and Isaiah with Enuma Elish, and the Bible. I was totally convinced by that to the point where I felt it was justified to write this book, and quite frankly, formed possibly a revolution in our understanding of the creation.
Okay, while you were talking, I was reminded of something I had read a long time ago, so I was looking through my library to find it. It was the book Worlds in Collision by Immanuel Velikovsky. And on page 11, he talks about, since the time of Laplace is one of the theories for the formation, he created one of the theories for the formation of the solar system. Basically, the sun at one point, while the gases were combining to make the sun, pieces were flying off and eventually cooled and whatnot in the solar system. And he points out that if that's true, then everything should be rotating in the same direction and the same angular momentum as the sun, if everything flew off the sun that way. And he
Yes,
says, since
it's called
the
the
time
nebular
of the planet,
hypothesis.
yeah, the nebular hypothesis, he talks about that next to the tidal theory. But he says right here, since the time of Laplace, new members of the solar system have been discovered. Now we know that though the majority of the satellites revolve in the same direction as the planets revolve and the sun rotates, the moons of Uranus revolve in a plane almost perpendicular to the orbital plane of their planet, and 3 of the 11 moons of Jupiter, 1 of the 9 moons of Saturn, and 1 of the moons of Neptune revolve retrogradely. These facts contradict the main argument of the Laplace theory: a rotating nebula could not produce satellites revolving in 2 different directions. So what you're describing, and actually, if I remember right, this has been a long time since I read this book, Velikovsky, I believe, thought it was Venus coming through the solar system, and then eventually settling where Venus is now, that caused a lot of stuff that you attribute to Planet X.
Right. I would just flush Velikovsky. He's not any good.
What's that?
I would ignore Velikovsky. I read it. It just wasn't any good.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book, but you keep talking about the Enuma Elish. That's explain what that is to my listeners. This is the Babylonian creation epic, correct?
Yeah, Enuma Elish is the Babylonian account of the creation. It describes, instead of kind of a static, more of a scientific approach to the creation, where the sun and moon and planets are all, and stars are all these inanimate objects, which was unusual for the ancient Near East, and actually a very scientific approach. Because in the ancient world, the sun, moon, and planets were considered to be deities that had taken a physical form or were manifesting physical attributes. And this is how it was in Enuma Elish. They were all the sun and moon and planets, according to the Sitchin hypothesis and my belief, and also what must have been the original concept of the Sumerians, because in a creation epic, the gods of the Sumerians were the sun, moon, and planets. They wouldn't have been the earth, and they wouldn't have been like mud and rocks and the seas and the oceans like secular mythologists want us to believe. They worship the planets as the gods. So in the Sitchin's hypothesis, which I believe is the correct one, they worship the planets and the sun and the moon, which were featured in their creation story as the main characters, given names. And Earth, for example, is named Tiamat, which was a dragon goddess who was closely associated with water, which is a perfect description of the Earth, which has ever since then in various mythologies been described as a dragon. But then they say all these other things are not the other planets, even though the Sumerians' worship of the planets was at the center of their cosmology. So I take it literally that this Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, describes the formation of the planets from the nebula disk. It actually talks about how the major god of their deity, Apsu, which Sitchin describes as the sun, brought forth all these other deities from this, what is described as kind of a disk, or kind of a halo, which is like a disk. And all the gods of the Sumerians were born from this halo of this deity Apsu. And it's actually an excellent description of how the planets are formed, because they are also, because we can say definitively that's how the planets were formed, because we can see other solar systems in formation where that very thing is happening. It's exactly the same. So Laplace's theory is not really a theory anymore. It's kind of pretty much a fact, because we can observe it in process in other solar systems forming. So we know for sure that's how our solar system formed, or in a very similar way. So we can say for sure that that's how it happened. So my theory is that the Genesis 1:1 does not describe the creation of the Earth, but actually a modification of the Earth, so it exists in its present form. The creation of the universe by God was not necessary to be described. It was, it's obvious. It was obvious. Really, just the first only 2 or 3 chapters of the book of Genesis are dedicated to any creation at all. The remaining 47 talk about the history of mankind, specifically the descendants of Abraham. So there was very little emphasis placed on the creation in the Old Testament. So I don't think he intended to talk about anything about the creation except for the creation of the earth in its current form. It's possible that the earth was inhabited by previous beings even that were so wicked that it had to be wiped out. So it's possible that the Bible is written in such a way that all memory of everything prior to this giant impact, the interaction with Planet X, everything is wiped out, meant to be forgotten forever and not even mentioned in the Bible. So that's probably why they wrote it in the way they did. And the idea of this theme in the ancient Near East of the earth being divided into 2 pieces by kind of an intruding planet was so ubiquitous in the ancient Near East, and so such a common concept, I don't think Moses even conceived the possibility that people would forget about it and kind of diverge into these various theories which don't take this into account anymore. everyone, I mean, literally everyone thought of the creation as a result of a conflict between a divine being and a dragon. Everyone all around the Israelites, all the countries they lived in, all the countries they came from, all the surrounding countries had some version of this myth. So it was absolutely ubiquitous. And it's easy for me to make this argument because that's what the Hebrews believed. It's absolutely a rock-solid certainty.
Right. And I think the point that Velikovsky was making is that even Laplace theory everything should be spinning in the right direction, but clearly something came through our solar system and tipped the planets over and made things spin opposite ways and really perturbed things.
Yes.
And so, to your point, you believe that that's Planet X, and to the point of the gap theory, this is something that always intrigued me. Like I said, I just kind of always held it at arm's length, but literally in the last, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks, I've become almost obsessed with this because it keeps coming at me. It came at me from Zen Garcia. Right after I interviewed him, I found your book as part of the collection that I got from David Flynn. And then a publisher who was looking at my first book, Babylon Rising and the First Shall Be Last, sent me a book that his father wrote in 1997 called A Conspiracy of Angels, and I start reading his book, and he's talking about it too. And then I surf over to Canary Cry Radio, and Basil and Gons, the two hosts of that show, we're talking about it too. And I'm like, okay, something's going on, because literally, like, in a 1 week period of time, it seemed like everybody in the world was on this subject. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have to get into it myself. And I'm really intrigued by it because when you look at Genesis 1:1, or 1:2, I should say, and the earth was without form and void, tohu vavohu in Hebrew, we have to contend with Isaiah 45:18, where Isaiah says that God did not create the world, it says in vain in King James, but it's the same word, tohu, without form. So either there's a contradiction or there's another way of looking at it, and the gap theory seems to explain it, that in the beginning God created it not tohu, but then it became tohu. It got messed up somehow, and from what I'm hearing from you and what I'm reading in some of these other guys' writings, it got messed up big time. I mean, if it was knocked out of an orbit that was previously between Mars and Jupiter, and is now where it is today, that's a pretty significant event. And
right.
You talk about, you mentioned it earlier, the war of God versus the dragon. Walk us through that.
The dominant paradigm of the ancient Near East, of the creation paradigm, was that the earth was created in its present form. It previously existed, but in its present form, it was substantially modified as a result of a conflict between a divine being in heaven, who was symbolized by a star, and the planet Earth. This is true in the Mesopotamia myths, the Canaanite myths, Greco-Roman myths, later Egyptian myths have allusions to it. And Hittites also, the myth of, I think it's Yonkis, talks about a dragon in the creation. They all talked about this concept. It was ubiquitous. And it was all about the dragon being divided in half, one half of being used to create heaven, and one half being used to create earth. Now there's 3 different heavens in the scriptures. One that is the earth's atmosphere, one that is somewhere in space, and one, the third heaven, that is where God lives. My theory is that the first heaven is indeed the atmosphere where the birds fly. But the second heaven is actually the asteroid belt, because that forms a distinct division between the inner planets and the outer planets. And it also is described several times in the Bible. Heaven is actually literally described as a place where rocks are stored. The heavenly armories, I think it's called in the King James, or something like that, the munitions of rocks. That is a perfect description of the asteroid belt. And in that sense, heaven, the part of the earth that was split off as a result of the divine conflict, part of it was left in space, and that would have been, in that kind of a conflict scenario, that would have been a bunch of rocks flowing through space, which is exactly what the asteroid belt is. So you have this dragon, quote-unquote, which is a metaphor for the earth, being split in two, one part being created to heaven, which is the asteroid belt, and the other part earth. Its head moved further, closer to the sun, it will be warmer. It's given a certain rotation rate, an axial tilt, and also a moon, which scientists are definitive in their belief, uniform in their belief, was actually created as a result of a giant impact. Perhaps you've heard of the giant impact theory. Around 1980, after the various theories on how the moon was formed were brought forward and found to be unsatisfying, such as the fission theory, as in the moon just comes out of the earth for no reason. The idea that it was spun off Earth, which rotated very rapidly. And I think at least one of the major theory, it was determined that the only way that the moon could have been formed based on the Apollo moon lander data and other measurements was if it had been created as a result of a collision between an object roughly the size and mass of Earth, not roughly the size and mass of Mars, not the planet Mars itself, but an object about that size, which embedded itself in Earth and injected a similar amount of mantle material into space where it cooled and solidified into the moon. That is called the giant impact theory. And my theory about Planet X is basically a combination of the mainstream astronomical Planet X theory plus the giant impact theory, modified by Sitchin's ideas, so that the Planet X was an impact, one of its satellites impacted into Earth, embedding itself into the Earth like an arrow into the heart of the dragon. And part of the ejecta was pushed out, which later formed the moon. And this explains why, just after Tiamat is divided into two in Enuma Elish, we have a description of the creation of the moon, because that's what happened after the giant impact. Heaven and Earth were divided into two. That is the asteroid belt in the Earth. Earth was moved, and the moon was also formed, all by the same series of events. Also, the seas were formed because not many people know this, but the Earth's oceans were actually formed as a result of what scientists believe to be multiple meteoric strikes against the Earth, which released waters from the mantle. Most of the water on Earth, in Earth right now, is actually in the mantle, chemically bonded with what are called water-bearing minerals, hydrous minerals, such as serpentine and talc, which have water as part of their molecular structure. And when they're placed under pressure, they release this water, and it shoots up into the sky. And this is probably where the fountains of the Dead came from. Probably meteorites were striking the Earth during Noah's time and causing these fountains to shoot up and help flood the Earth. But the giant impact would have converted a large amount of the mantle into pretty much pure water, much of which would have gone into space, where it bombed with the asteroids, which explains why the asteroids we're now finding have a large amount of water as part of their structure, which would be impossible otherwise, if not for the giant impact theory as I propose it. And also, much, if not most of the water fell back to Earth, forming Earth's oceans. There's no other mechanism to describe that massive amount of water just forming. It would have to be released chemically from the minerals by a huge amount of pressure from the Earth's mantle. So the giant impact theory also explains how the Earth's oceans could be created. It also explains how the comets could be created, because the comets are essentially basically asteroids with a large amount of water on their surface. So that much water ice would not have been part of asteroids unless it had been much chemical released on a large scale. And even in Enuma Elish, they're described as growling demons, which fought on Tiamat's side, whose bodies were filled with water. And their radiance was very great and filled the heavens with a tremendous halo. An object in space filled with water, a tremendous halo, is a perfect description of the comets. So in Enuma Elish, you actually have a description of the creation of the comets, which would be explained by the giant impact event also. It all fits so perfectly. It's just point for point for point. All the anomalies of the solar system are explained by this end of the creation, are explained by this single paradigmatic conflict between God and the dragon, which forms the foundation of the concept of the Bible throughout the Old Testament and even through the New Testament in the book of Revelation, where you have this revivification of the conflict between God and the dragon once more. As it was in the beginning, so will begin in the end. Urzeit und Endzeit, beginning and end, as described by Hermann Gunkel in his book on the subject, a famous German theologian who promoted this hypothesis that, I think it was in the early 1900s, that the mythology of the Mesopotamians was cognate with that of the God versus dragon material to be found in the Bible, so close as to have a common source. And that common source is probably from Abraham, and who came out of the Sumerian Empire right before it collapsed, and from whose traditions of the creation of the Bible were eventually written down, and that's why we have descriptions of the dragon conflicted with God in the creation of the earth, because they were from ancient times.
Now, I was looking through the scriptures the other day when I was first being introduced to this, or reintroduced to this topic, and the thought occurred to me that we all know from the book of Revelation that there's going to be a redo. After the millennial reign of Christ, God's going to recreate the heaven and the earth. So, and we always think of God as being eternal, but I think most of us think we project that eternal future. We neglect to realize that, well, he's eternal the other way too. He goes back eternally just as much as he goes forward eternally. So, what was he doing for eternity prior to, say, 6,000 years ago, if you believe that. The Earth is only that old now. You know, if we can wrap our minds around the fact that there's going to be a redo at the end of the millennial reign of Christ, why is it hard to believe that we could be living in a redo right now?
It's not. I mean, my theory is that Planet X comes around every either 1 or 2,000 years to inaugurate new eras of mankind. My theory is it's every roughly 2,000 years. My theory is that because of a close interaction possibly between Planet X and Jupiter, or one or more of the other planets, Planet X will actually come very close to Earth this time. Normally it only comes as close to the asteroid belt. The last time it appeared around 2,000 years ago was as the Star of Bethlehem, which inaugurated the birth of Christ. My theory is that one of my original motivations for studying this topic was to figure out what was the Star of Bethlehem. And when I had exhausted all the theories regarding the Star of Bethlehem, I realized, you know, I came across Stitchin's book on Planet X, and I realized I never heard of Planet X. This is just a sort of bizarre anomaly that would fit the Star of Bethlehem phenomenon perfectly. And I've followed that track ever since, with the theory that the astral sign that preceded his first coming will be the same that precedes his second coming. And why have two different signs? Why have the same sign for the same person? So my theory is that the Planet X has an orbital period of 2,000 years, but some sort of interaction with one of the outer planets will bring it close to the Earth. To explain many of the descriptions of, for example, Matthew 24, when the powers of the heavens are shaken, that literally means in the Greek concept that the planets themselves will be moved in their orbits, because that the powers is a description of the deities of heaven, which are the planets. And also the description of the trumpets. And my interview with Zen, actually I went into depth about how the wormwood was actually probably a bit of the original Earth, which had become ground down and kind of flash frozen in space. And this kind of this concentrated powdered plant life as part of a meteor, asteroid, or comet that passed through Earth's atmosphere might sprinkle a lot of this stuff back into Earth's atmosphere in a concentrated form, poisoning Earth's waters and with ancient wormwood, which was actually a real plant, which was hallucinogenic in nature. So this was like a poisoning and drugging the American, Freudian stuff, the people of the world at that time, at the time of the end. And a lot of the descriptions of the end times judgments are related, in my opinion, to Planet X, specifically to meteorites and asteroids and comets being cast down on Earth by Planet X's gravitational pull, possibly from that were traveling in Planet X's orbit, in its train, in its orbit throughout the solar system, preceding in its orbit. I even talk in the chapter 6 about the book of Job. That was actually a description of the return of Planet X around Job's time, which was around 2000 BC. How it passed through the solar system at that time and threw a lot of asteroids down on Earth, causing the destruction of Sumer, which occurred around that time, and also the catastrophe which befell Job. And in my opinion, Job was really a description of kind of a collation of all the Planet X material, oral traditions, and so forth, in place at that time around the story of a man who was affected by a meteorite that struck southern Iraq around that time. I talk about that in chapter 6. And I forget the original train of thought. I'm getting off on a different track, but basically the paradigm is the God versus dragon is that of God Himself coming in and attacking Earth using this planet, using it to judge this planet. And this will happen again in the end times when Planet X returns, passes near Earth, showers us with asteroids, and when it comes on its near flyby, the destruction will be so great that all the cities will fall down, all the civilizations will be destroyed, and all the armies of the Earth will be wiped out by the passing of this planet. The lightning that passes between the planets will literally incinerate the entire army of the beast, and then Jesus will come down and claim the Earth and take control of it for 1,000 years. After which time Planet X returns again, because its orbit will have been shortened by its orbit will have been modified by this interaction with Earth. It'll come back again after 1,000 years, and the fire that falls on the armies of Gog and Magog will be the same thing. Once again, Planet X passes near Earth, lightning passes between the planets and fries the armies that are arrayed against the people of God. It happens again. It's the same pattern over and over again. God sends Planet X to defeat His enemies and save His people. That's the paradigm of the way He operates throughout history. Even when Planet X didn't come close, it signaled the advent of one who would save His people. In this case, Planet X heralded 2,000 years ago the birth of Christ, and returns again. It'll herald His second coming, at which time the Planet X itself will return with Jesus, and Jesus will use it as His primary weapon to defeat the forces of Satan.
So then, with this 2,000-year interaction with Earth, you'd have the creation account happening roughly 4,000 BC. 2,000 years later, about the time of Abram being born, the time of Job, you think, would be the next interaction. Then the next time would be the appearing in the sky to herald the birth of Jesus. And then the coming one will be the time of the Battle of Armageddon. And then the final one will recreate the heaven and earth just like it did the first time at the end of the millennial reign. Would that summarize what your theory is?
Yes, that summarizes it pretty well. Except for the final return will actually be a final conflict between Planet X and Earth, which Earth will lose, and it'll be thrown into the sun. And the new Earth is not actually a revived Earth, it is actually Planet X, which will take Earth's place in its orbit around the sun. This planet being specifically designed to replace Earth in just the way that Jesus will replace Satan as the ruler of God's people. It's a parallel. Jesus has his own planet, and Satan has this one. Both Satan and all his works and everything in the earth will be burnt up forever by fire, just as said in, I think it's Thessalonians, I forget the exact phrase. The earth and all its works will be burned up forever. So comfort yourselves with these words. Even though it seems like the wicked prosper now, they and everything they built will be totally destroyed and thrown into the sun. It'll be forgotten. Not only will it be destroyed, it'll be forgotten, as if it never existed. And a new planet will be created specifically for the chosen of God, whom Jesus himself selected to live in this planet. And that is the planet on which the New Jerusalem will land. He would never bring down the New Jerusalem onto the earth. It's just too corrupt. Too much wickedness, too much bad history. So not only will we have a New Jerusalem, a new city to live in, he'll have a new planet to put it on.
Well, that's interesting. So do you believe that Planet X and Nibiru are one and the same?
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's exactly the same planet, different name for the same planet.
Okay. So then, if I'm hearing you right, do you believe that God is that I don't want to sound like a Mormon or something here, but do you think that God is riding Nibiru, or what is your?
I don't know if he lives on it. The planet would be extremely cold and dark. The theory, part of the theory is that just as Jesus says, behold, I approach like a thief in the night. Planet X, like most comets, is actually covered or enclouded with a huge amount of dark, black organic material that is literally darker than coal. Most people don't know this, but most comets are covered with this dark, cold, black organic material, which makes them invisible to the naked eye until their tail forms when they come close to the sun. That is what I believe Jesus meant when he says, behold, I come like a thief in the night. Planet X will not become visible to the naked eye until its tail forms, because it has a tail like a comet, a really big tail. But before that time, it's pretty much invisible to all but the most advanced astronomical telescopes. No one on Earth who doesn't have like an infrared advanced telescope will be able to detect it. But I don't think he's riding it. I think he's using it like a heavenly mace, as described in Revelation 2 when he says, I inherit I will smash my enemies like a broken vessel, like a clay pot with a mace. I believe the mace he's referring to is Planet X, which is his primary weapon. He will use it just as he did in the beginning to divide heaven and earth and create a new earth from the old version, which may have been full of corruption and satanic machinations that nobody knows what happened with the old earth. But this new earth, he destroyed the old earth and created a new one by using this planet as kind of a mace to smash it. And he says in Revelation 2, right before he says, behold, I am the bright morning star, he then talks about this mace, which he'll use to smash earth. So I believe the corollary there is he's saying, I will appear, if not actually riding it, I will send Planet X to destroy my enemies in the end times. And it says in Revelation 2, those who overcome, I will give him the morning star. What he is saying there is, you will get to live here in this new planet I'm creating specifically for you. And the old earth and all the corruption in it and all the bad things that happen in there will be thrown down and destroyed. And all the works in it burned up and forgotten.
I always wonder about that scripture where it says, I'll give you the morning star. So you're saying that the inheritance is, the new earth will be what was formerly the hammer of God, basically, that destroys this one? Yes.
I'll read out the passage for you. It's Revelation 2:27 through 28. He shall rule them with a rod of iron, and they shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessels. As I also have received from my Father, and I'll give him the morning star. Actually, the morning star, there's actually a weapon called the morning star, which is basically a mace. That was one of the appellations for a mace during the times of the the nightly orders. It was also called a morning star. After this passage, they said they would strike their enemies with the morning star, literally the description of this mace that Jesus was going to use to destroy the earth and cast it down forever. It occurs a couple of different places. I think maybe Revelation 1 also. And this idea of a morning star and the destruction of Jesus' enemies.
But doesn't Jesus call himself? Isn't Jesus referred to as the morning star himself, though?
Yes, he is referred to as the morning star, but I don't think he is the planet. It is his heavenly sign and his inheritance.
So that's why you call it the sign of the Son of Man. Because I always wonder about that too, where Jesus is talking about him returning, but he first says, "Then you'll see the sign of the Son of Man in the sky." And I never really thought about it. I guess I just thought that the sign was him showing up, but no. When I went back and looked at it, I said, no, it looks like there's something that heralds his coming.
Exactly. That's the whole point of the book. The point of the book is to figure out what is the heavenly sign. That says that in the introduction. Read the introduction. It gives a nice summary. The point of the book is to figure out what is this heavenly sign and why does it herald his second coming? What does it have to do at the end of the age? And the whole book is describing how the sign is actually a planet that comes and goes every 2,000 years, which he uses every once in a while to come back. 2000 BC, he visited Abraham bodily. Abraham was believed to have been born after the appearance of a new star. Jesus, of course, 2,000 years later was born under the sign of a new star.
That's
and now
true.
2,000 years later, if Jesus returns again, he'll return as this planet appears as the sign of the Son of Man. And the end of the age, as described in Matthew 24. That's the purpose of that's the inspiration for the title.
I had forgotten about that Abraham was born under the sign of a star too. That's in I think the Joshua, maybe the book of Joshua.
The Apocalypse of Abraham or the Testament of Abraham. It's not a reliable source, but it's interesting that he was thought to be born under a star as well, because that would have fit the paradigm not only of Job and the destruction of Sumer, which did occur about 2000 BC, according to these Sumerian accounts. Their god Enlil appeared in heaven, which was equivalent to Marduk, or to the Yahweh of the Old Testament. Their concept, their high god, appeared in heaven and cast down a heavenly spear upon Sumer. And they believed that Enlil was probably the same as Marduk, which is probably Planet X. So there's a description of what was probably Planet X appearing in heaven in the Sumerian texts around 2000 BC, which threw down a meteor apparently, which destroyed Sumer and also wiped out Job.
Interesting. Now, we only got about 9 minutes left, but just real quick, what would your thoughts be on who or what inhabited the prior Earth before Genesis 6:2?
My theory was that Satan came down, based on the previous patterns of how Satan operates. God would create something and Satan would corrupt it. So God created the earth in its original form. Satan came down, just started experimenting with stuff. Maybe he created the dinosaurs at that time, explaining why they're so much older and just kind of screwed up and not in accordance to the pattern which God later created. He had kind of a pre-creation where he was trying to usurp God's attempt to create mankind and create a monstrous race of his own. And God wiped that out with the giant impact and destroyed the previous earth and everything on it. And then created the new heavens and new earth. And then Satan came down and corrupted that one, so there's been a constant running battle against God and Satan to keep it from totally corrupting it again. He sent the flood to clean it. He sent the Israelites to wipe out the giants, to wipe out Satan's works during that period of time. And he'll return again at the end of the age to wipe out the workings of Satan at that time, and again, he'll wipe out the workings of Satan at the end of the millennium. And at that point, in my opinion, after a series of conflicts with Satan, it'll become absolutely clear in the Father's eyes that Satan is irredeemed and irredeemable. So he'll decide, this is it. He cannot be redeemed. We'll have to get rid of him forever. Even though he was this great being, it was very useful to me. He's just more trouble than he's worth. So they trap them in the pit again, and they throw him and the entire earth and everything in it into the sun, where he is, and everything about him, and the entire memory of him will be destroyed and trapped forever.
Wow. Okay. I got another question. What is your take on the Hopi's prophecy and the red and blue Kachinas. Is that related to this?
I don't know. The blue Kachina doesn't seem to fit because Planet X, or at least Nibiru, is described in the Sumerian texts. And Sitchin was right. The Nibiru does describe an unusual star, which was different than the other ones. It's described in the actual Sumerian text as, at first appearance, being blood red, not blue. So maybe they are talking about Planet X, maybe they're not. But the color blue does not match the description of that given in Sumerian text, which I think are the primary ones. That said, it could well be. I really don't know.
Do you think maybe it's got other things in tow? Like a moon or something along with it?
Could be. I mean, Planet X or the Nibiru star.
Yeah.
Planet X?
Yeah.
Planet X has probably has all kinds of junk in its orbit. This is what I believe hits the Earth during the tribulation period. There's probably a huge amount of debris that was kept in its orbit as a result of the giant impact, as you can imagine. When I say, for example, I use as a truck goes through an intersection that hits a car, there's going to be all kinds of junk all over the place. It's just not going to be a clean hit. There's going to be stuff everywhere. There's going to be bits of the car left in the truck, which will occasionally fall off as it continues on in its journey. And that's what it's like with Planet X. There's all kinds of huge asteroids and comets and who knows what traveling in its orbit with it. And that's the stuff that's going to strike Earth that precedes it in its orbit before it passes near. It's going to pass near Earth. It's going to pass into Earth's atmosphere. Stuff's going to hit Earth directly, which is why you have these massive impacts described, where the entire Earth is shaken and the sun is delayed in its orbit. This is what's happening. It's being hit by massive asteroids that are in the orbital path of Planet X, which explains why they all hit at once instead of just, there's no randomness here. There's a reason this is happening. And the description of the sign appearing in heaven, which people are terrified of, it says all the tribes will mourn. Why would they mourn a sign appearing in heaven if there wasn't a sign of imminent danger? And that's why I'm convinced that Planet X, or something like it, is the sign of the Son of Man. All the evidence, all the ancillary evidence, all the corollary areas, it all points clearly to the idea that Planet X will return in the end times as the sign of the Son of Man in the end of the age.
Oh, fantastic. I'll tell you what, you give me a lot to think about and a lot to research. I consider myself a researcher. Many of you have heard me say that before, and by that I mean I research that which has been searched by others before me. And so you've given me a lot to think about, and I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight. And, man, I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep reading your book and then see if we can schedule another time to do this again.
Absolutely.
Well, fantastic. Well, we got about 3 minutes left, so why don't you give your contact information out again so people can get your book and check it out for themselves and contact you.
The major book we've been talking about is called Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age. It's available from survivormall.com. That's survivormall.com, survivormall.com. You can access that from my website at planet-x.info. That's planet-x.info. You can also get it directly from Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or order through your local bookstore. There's both a print and Kindle version available on Amazon.com. The other website I have is Mysterious World. That has a lot of material on the Giants, mysteriousworld.com. I will also have a book on the Giants coming out later this year through Defender Press, which will cover more about what we were talking about in the Giants, plus a lot more, plus my theories on the mysterious Zohar, which is a mysterious stone, which I believe which ancient Jewish sages believed contained all knowledge and was also a communications device, which people would use to talk to God with, and how it's related to the Giants and how it's related to the end times and the beginning times. Lots of new stuff in there, new material to cover. Also new material in the Giants. And maybe writing some more articles for Tom on the Giants on RaidersNewsNetwork.com to promote the Giants book when it comes out, so that'll probably be available in a few months, so make sure to get the RSS feed for RaidersNewsNetwork.com.
Fantastic. Well, again, Doug, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It's been a real joy. It's been a lot of fun.
You can also get it from Amazon and Barnes & Noble, of course. Order through your local bookstore as well. There's both a print version and Kindle version available, too. And for Mysterious World, you can go to mysteriousworld.com. And if you wish to send me an email, you can send an email to publisher@mysteriousworld.com, or you can look up Mysterious World on Facebook, and we have a Facebook page as well, also a Planet X page.
Excellent. Well, speaking of Planet X, what is Planet X? How would you define Planet X? What is it?
Planet X is a mainstream astronomical concept derived in order to try to figure out some of the anomalies in our solar system. The original Planet X theory was derived by Percival Lowell in the late 1900s as the name of an unknown planet which they believed orbited beyond Neptune. Now, when they searched for Planet X, they used the conventional methods of blink comparison to see the difference between two different plates, two different images taken of photographs of the night sky. And they had a man named Clyde Tombaugh come in, a young astronomer, come in and go through tens of thousands of plates using what is called a blink comparator to see if he could find Planet X beyond the planet Neptune. Using this technique, which is basically showing two different images of the same piece of sky a few seconds apart, or possibly a few minutes apart, to see if there's any differences between the two. And if you see a difference, that image will contain the image of a planet because of that distance, because of parallax. Only a distant object, or only a planet in our solar system, or an object in our solar system would move because the background stars are, for all practical purposes, fixed because they're so far away. So using that technique, Clyde Tombaugh found the planet, what turned out to be planet Pluto, I think around 1930, something like that. But it wasn't the Planet X they were looking for. So the Planet X theory kind of lingered for a while because they weren't able to find it using that technique. But when the Voyager spacecraft, the Voyager probes, passed Uranus and Neptune in the 1970s, they found both of these planets had been radically transformed by some sort of external force. The planet Uranus was actually spinning on its side, and it had formed a ring system after it had been turned on its side, which was kind of unusual, indicating that it had been disrupted by a very large object, a massive planet-sized object that had intruded into our solar system sometime in the solar system's past. Neptune was similarly messed up. Its rotation and magnetic axes were about 80 degrees off kilter. It was very strange. It had a moon, Neptune, which had a normal orbit, but also a moon called Nereid, which had an elliptical orbit, which was like a 9-to-1 ratio, which was really weird, which should not have happened, and another moon which orbited backwards. So, contrary to the other moons. So, when they did the mathematics, they determined the anomalies with Uranus and Neptune could only have occurred if there was an interaction with a planet-sized object and a planet intruding into our solar system. This planet is about 5 times the mass of Earth, and entering our solar system from the outside. And so that's what revived the Planet X theory, and there was a craze about searching for Planet X for the next couple of decades. It's died down from there, but well into the 1980s and in the early 1990s, there are all kinds of articles and research done on the search for Planet X. And in my book, Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age, chronicles the major research done on Planet X during that period. And they're still looking for it. They believe that it is possibly in the southern hemisphere, having an elliptical orbit, because, in order to have interacted with the solar system and yet be invisible, it would have to be have an orbit that is that precesses over time, and it actually shifts in its angle to the solar system. This explains why the comets orbit at an angle to the solar system. Comets, many people don't know, they have not only they have orbits that take them out of the solar system for very elliptical orbits, but they also have orbits, many of them, that are at an angle to the ecliptic. So they not only exit the solar system on the x-axis, but also on the y-axis. And the only way this could have happened is if an intruding object came in and brought them in. And this is where another reason for the Planet X theory is. Astronomers believe Planet X, or an object like Planet X, when it comes into our solar system, brings the comets in with it. And this is why we have comets that come in and out of our solar system, because there's no other way to describe, no other mechanism to describe how this could happen. There has to be an intrusive object coming in and out of our solar system. So the evidence for Planet X is, at this point, primarily the great eccentricities in the outer solar system, and also the existence of the comets. So the Planet X theory is actually a mainstream astronomical theory, which has been, widely held by a number of astronomers for over 100 years now. Now, when you talk about the Sitchin-esque approach, where you have Planet X as the featured character in the Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian creation epic, you have to take the idea that the ancient Babylonians were actually aware of how the Earth was created, And this is a bit of a stretch for some people, even people who believe in God, because it's a bit of a stretch. But if we were to take, well, when you have biblical passages which describe God's conflict with the dragon and the sea, in the context of the creation, Psalm 74, and several times in Job, and also in some of the Psalms, you have Psalm 74 and also Job and Isaiah. You have a clear distinction, a clear description in the scriptures also of the earth being created as a result of a conflict between God and some sort of a dragon. And now in English, the dragon actually symbolized the earth. And it does also in the Bible because, though it's not specifically stated, it's clearly implied that as a result of this conflict, earth was created. Psalm 74, for example, says, "You defeated the dragon, you created the seasons and the times." As a result of the conflict, the earth's orbital period and axial tilt was somehow created as a result of this conflict. And I get into this in depth into my book, how Enuma Elish actually probably is a very detailed description of a conflict between planet X and the Earth in ancient times, forming the Earth as we know it now. The Earth having originally formed in the fourth position from the Sun, not the third, explaining why there is a huge amount of rocky material out there in the form of the asteroid